And I think that ties into my understanding of what I see as a hope warrior. A hope warrior is someone who takes what they've been through, what has happened to them, and who decides what they'll do with what has happened to them, who becomes an example of what is possible. It's someone who takes responsibility for their own healing and who takes responsibility for their life, a radical responsibility.
Welcome to the Hope Warrior Project podcast, where we bring you an extra dose of hope to help you get over the humps of life. I'm Stephanie Martino.
And I'm Lydia Zuniga, and together we are bringing you real stories of hope from real people. We believe by hearing other people's stories of challenge and transformation, we can all gain some hope for ourselves.
So if you've been looking to find and hold on to hope, you're in the right place. Join us on this journey as we all become warriors of hope. Hey everyone, recently I was very fortunate to meet our guest today. We actually met virtually, right? Because that's how we meet people these days, but also because she lives in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and I'm in Chicago area, so obviously not in the same vicinity. But my immediate impression of Sarah was that she is a very energetic and inspiring woman. And then when I had the chance to talk to her, I learned about her passion for helping people shift away from this overworked, overstressed mode of living, which I think probably so many of us have experienced, to one of health and purpose and intention so that they can truly enjoy their lives. She's the founder of The Genius Body and the host of the Mind Body Academy podcast, which she'll tell us a little bit more about, both of those later in today's episode. But Sarah's life wasn't always this positive. Growing up, she experienced several traumatic events that actually led to her attempting suicide at age 17. So today she is here to share her journey of reclaiming her health, both her physical health as well as a healthy state of mind. So welcome to the show, Sarah. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me part of this beautiful mission.
Absolutely, Sarah. And I don't know why I didn't ask you this before, but do you speak French?
I do. Oui.
It just like clicked in my head. I was like, they speak French there. I took French all through high school, a little bit in college, and I actually studied in Paris for a summer for fashion design. So I was like, oh, it's so cool. I love that.
Language of love.
Oh my gosh, yes, so romantic. I couldn't hold a conversation with you now though, because once you stop using it, it's gone. But a little bit here and there. But anyway, yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Obviously, to get to where you found yourself, it's a very vulnerable thing to share. So I want to applaud you for that. And just to help our listeners kind of relate to you and get a feel for why you found yourself so desperate. Like where was your mind at? What were you feeling? What led up to being hospitalized that one day?
Yeah, I think so many people can relate to going through a very difficult early life. Most people have been through at least one form of trauma, if not just difficulties. It's a formative phase of your life before you're 18. And in my case, from a very young age, it was one thing snowballing into another thing, almost like a cartoon of the little snowball that snowballs into a bigger snowball. And for me, it began really early on when my parents separated, and it was not an easy separation. And so many people experience that today. Most people are separated or have parents who are separated. And because of that, what happened was I grew up with both parents being fairly absent. They were so focused on what was going on with them that it really threw the kids into the backdrop. And I spent a lot of my early life really looking after myself, looking after my brother. And over time, around 12 years old, my father had a severe stroke. And essentially he became like a man trapped with childlike capabilities. So again, there was this role reversal in my life of looking after a handicapped father, teaching him how to read, write, speak, walk, all of these things that, you know, you have to learn over again with the awareness that you should be able to know how to do all of that. And so growing up really quickly, that just made me skip over so many parts of my life, and, you know, didn't have the awareness to recognize how I was taking so much of that on and using it to victimize myself. Back then, nothing felt as good as food tasted. And what happened was I went to food as a false refuge, and I would eat, you know, to try and get away from myself and get away from what was happening, to tolerate my life. And so I struggled with disordered eating and weight gain, and that became this distraction for me from what was really going on in my life, which I didn't really have the tools or the resources or the support to know how to handle other than through food. So through my teenage years, just struggling with all of this and not really knowing where to begin, because, you know, the things that we go on to struggle with the most in life, health, wealth, you know, these are things that we don't receive very much education on. And the result of that is that so often we end up feeling like life is just happening to us, that our health just happens to us, that wealth, we get a sense we have to work for it, but still there's almost this mystery around all of it. So for me, it was a constant battle with my physical health, not just with the weight gain, but also getting sick very often. And then my mental health just constantly being something I was really struggling to stabilize in feeling good in my life. So because of that, when there were some big life changes going on to what's called CEGEP here, so between university and high school, there's some transition years in Quebec in the system here. And I struggled to adapt. I was in a small school where grades were everything to get in. And so for the very first time in my life and in a lot of these other students' lives, we were confronted with not doing well in school. And when your entire identity is hitched to being externally validated through grades, that was extremely disruptive for me in my life. And I had a few other destabilizing things, again, continuing to contend with, helping my father through his rehabilitation and all of that, that just really created so much compounding. And I was just carrying so much that when I was getting close to the age of 18, I just felt like I was closer to the casket than I was to adulthood. And so that's what really led up to all of that just building and building on itself.
That's a lot to take growing up. You know, as a child, we should be able to be children, right? And it sounds like you had to grow up pretty quickly. And like you said, take on that adult role, even almost that parent role. I'm sure that has a bigger impact on someone than what maybe we realize, you know. If you haven't been through it, I'm sure you probably don't. I wouldn't understand that. I haven't been through that. So I'm sure there's a lot to that. So when you got to this point, you know, around, 17, 18, when you were found yourself at this crisis moment, can you talk a little bit about that event in particular and kind of what happened with that?
Yeah. So leading up to that, I had been through something extremely confusing because I had a very disordered relationship to my body. I made my body the problem. I treated my body like the problem, and I couldn't see how I was doing that. But what really threw me off was an incident where I got taken advantage of physically, and I had already felt so much disgust towards my body, but now it was even more confusing to sit with. And so just on the day of my birthday, about to turn 18, I just was sitting with so much heaviness that I couldn't digest, that led me to wake up the next day in the hospital after trying to take my life. And it was a very confronting moment because you wake up in a white room to the sound of machines clicking and beeping and breathing and ventilating. And there's one window that opens inward to an observation deck. And there's a moment of like intense aliveness that kind of rushes through you, because here you are, you're still here. And at the same time, kind of like an animal trapped in a cage of like, hey, there's this glass and I'm being observed. But with that came this real just sense of I'm still here. And my case ended up kind of sliding through the cracks because I was hospitalized in a children's hospital, but I was then considered an adult. So the way that it was managed kind of slid through the cracks, but it was, in hindsight, one of the biggest gifts that I could have been given in my life, that it happened that way. It really truly did happen perfectly, because I was confronted with a realization that many of us struggle to arrive at in our lives, which is that our healing is our responsibility. And there can be people around us, who are there to support us through that. And there's definitely value in that. And also, we're going to have moments where the person we need to be able to depend on is ourselves. And I think I went through my early life not accompanying myself through what I was going through. I kept leaving myself in what I was going through. And so waking up there, all of a sudden, you are there with you, and there's no one else in that room. But I got present to that, and through the process in the months afterwards, I was just able to come to the recognition that we are all born, but we don't all have the opportunity to make the conscious decision to live our lives. And what does that even mean, right? Have you really decided that for yourself? I decided that for myself in that moment, and I made the agreement with myself, you know, because my case was mismanaged. I was kind of in this position where it's like either you do it in a very ultimate way, or you make the decision right now, and it's the only time in your life where you'll make this decision, that you're going to live and you're going to actually live. So again, what does that mean for you? And I'm so grateful that I had this kind of soul contract that I created with myself, because the one thing you go on to realize very quickly is there's no place to arrive at where life is permanently better. We all go through adversity, and that's part of our growth and our purpose for being here. Is pain is a real portal to consciousness and to a fuller experience of life. It's that rush that I was talking about that was so intense when I first came to in the hospital. But we can kind of microdose that in our day to day when we live from that place of, wait, can I check in with myself? Did I really live today? Or did I just try to get through today?
So it sounds like this was a real wake up call for you in your life. It sounds like a huge shift in your thinking from before being in the hospital to after. And I love this idea of, the agreement that you made with yourself. And you even mentioned that, before you weren't really like with yourself. And I think when we were talking about this, even preparing for this podcast, you mentioned something about, not being like you weren't there for yourself in your earlier life. And so I think that's a really interesting concept, because I've never really thought about that, but we have to also be our own support. And if we're not doing that, then we're not helping ourselves as well. So what started changing then for you after you made this agreement and, kind of had this shift in thinking? What did you start doing differently in your life?
Yeah, there's this phrase that I came across by Sanford Meisner, and it essentially says, like, your task is the task that impedes the task. So the task that gets in the way of the task. And for me, when it came to a question of deciding how to live and how to heal from what I had been experiencing earlier in my life, I had to recognize that, the healing had to come first, and it had to begin from the inside out. And that was very different, because when we're talking about, this sense of not being there for yourself, that comes a lot from the fact of needing to feel seen, acknowledged, validated from the outside in. And what we end up trying to do is control how other people treat us, control the way other people speak to us, control what's happening in our lives around us, changing our circumstances. We all get caught up in that. But so often when we want to experience a change, the first place from which to begin is our state of mind. And so recognizing that was so powerful, because if not, that's what makes life feel like such a struggle all the time. You're having to resist your own self, or push through and bulldoze through your own self to get to the place you want to go, whether that's more health, more money, whatever it is. For me, back then, I just really recognized, hang on a second, I need to meet myself where I am, not 10 steps ahead, not 10 paces behind in my past, just right here, right now, get present. And then ask yourself, and now what? Now what from here? And when I asked myself that question, what really came through for me was on a very visceral level. I just felt this impulse to move. And it was very different than how I treated my body in the past, in terms of really needing to punish it and go to the gym and work myself down to the ground, and to try and change my body. It wasn't about that at all. It was just this sense, this inner knowing that, hey, when you're releasing stress, when you've been through hard things, that gets locked into your body. Sometimes that gets locked as excess skin tissue. Sometimes that's just stress in your cells. That's just cellular memory remembering what emotions you've been experiencing most often. So if you want to create a new way of being, you have to release some of that. And emotion contains the word motion for a reason. It has to be moved out of us. So for me, that's what led me to find running. Essentially, for me, that's what it was going to be, because I looked around and I just felt this huge pull towards it. And at the time, I had huffed and puffed just to get around the block, but I just knew that there was something about that, and I would understand over time what that was. But I feel like we gravitate towards the modes of movement that most speak to what we're needing on a psychological level. So for me at that time, I needed that capacity to endure. Here I was ready to give up only months ago. I needed to build that reservoir within myself to keep going and to hit the wall and realize there's more to give, but also have moments where I could learn how to give myself grace even in the next breath. And so that's as I started to put myself into motion, and running especially forces you to spend time with yourself. So I could go internal with that. And it was the first moments where I could be with myself really quiet too. And that's really kind of the meditative flow that I got, that cultivated a capacity to be introspective as well as physically here on earth, healing in my 2 feet.
Yeah, I can relate so much to what you're saying about running. And I remember the last time we had this, the last time the three of us spoke, me and you were like, yeah, running. And then Stephanie was like, I hate running. Like, and then, we were like, well, like, and then we had that conversation, and I loved that conversation about like how, well, it's not just like everybody needs to run, right? It's like getting that mind body connection and feeling that, having your intuition speak to you in a way of like, what do you need right now? Because maybe you don't need to run right now. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it'll be running later. Maybe it'll never be running. You know what I mean? But like, you absolutely made a great point that running is an incredible tool, because you're with yourself. You're forced to be with your thoughts. And also that like rhythmic breathing helps with that too. Like getting into that state of hearing hearing yourself, because that's something I'm always telling my yoga students, is that the answers are in you, right? But we live in such a noisy world. Everybody's trying to tell us what we need and what we should be doing, what's safe, especially right now, right? What's safe, what isn't safe? Should you stay home? Should you wear the mask? Like all these things, it's so many conflicting messages, and it's so hard to know like what's right and what's wrong, right? But if you just quiet all those external voices enough to hear what's right for you, then that's your answer. So yeah, running has done that for, I think, both of us, but it doesn't have to be that, right? So, and I love that you talk about exercise in that way too, because so many of us think of, at least I did in my past, of like almost punishing your body through exercise. Like I'm too fat. Like I need to
change it.
I need to change it. I need to fix myself. I need to go and like just grind, right? I need to sweat it out. It's like a form of punishment. Well, of course you're not going to want to go to the gym. Like, really? So like, what if you think about it in a way that, like you said, you're letting emotions out, like you're moving your body because you love yourself, and finding, there's so many different workouts out there. There's so many ways to move your body. Like you can for sure find a way that feels good.
Beyond the exercise piece, it's that felt rightness, learning to check in with ourselves, because we are conditioned to look for the answers outside of ourselves. There's this concept that one of my teachers, Brooke Castillo, teaches on called how greed. And we're always looking for, how am I going to lose the weight? How am I going to make more money? And have you asked yourself that question? Because there are many ways to create a same result, but is your process congruent with the life you actually want to be living, with the way you want to go about creating that for yourself? And that's why so many people struggle, is they try and implement the how that this other person over there did and just the actions, but you don't know whether that person absolutely loved doing all the things required of them or felt challenged by, but also could cherish themselves through that process, versus you over here who's feeling deprived and restricted and you're just grinding it out and using so much willpower. That's going to be a very different experience of the same process. So creating a process that's right for you to create more of the life you want to be living, more of the health you want to experience, that's so important. And it's probably the most overlooked aspect of health and life, period, is just, have you been your own Google search? Have you inquired within?
I like that. Are you your own Google search? Whew, I like that. And I love the fact that we're talking about this, because it really has to be like, you have to be aligned with what you're doing. There has to be something that speaks to you. And I think that about that, even like with exercise, like we're talking, like, what is it that really you enjoy? What does your body enjoy? How does that fit with you? But also like various diets, eating. I mean, there's so many different things out there. And I think sometimes people could get really discouraged if, they try a particular plan or approach because somebody else did it and it worked for them. And then they try it and it doesn't work for them. And then they start attacking themselves. Like, well, I'm just no good. I have I'm not able to do this. Well, maybe that just wasn't the right plan for you. So search for something else, see what works for you. And it puts a more positive attitude towards it, versus almost going back to like this punishment thing. Like, I'm punishing myself. I can't have cake. I can't have cookies. I can't, if that's not you, that's not me. I will tell you, I will never give up all my sweets. So if I was ever to try to go on a diet plan or eating plan or whatever that said I could never have any more sweets, that would not work for me. That works for some people. So what is it that works for you? So I love that.
Yeah, whatever you're going after, do you feel like you have to push yourself towards it, or do you feel pulled towards it? That's what it comes down to, because at the end of the day, you can't struggle your way to enjoying your life more. And I think that's the message in all of this. If I can convey nothing else in this discussion, it's that, you can't struggle your way to enjoying your life more. And the minute you recognize that is the moment you can start creating enjoyment for yourself today, not on the other side of some result or some place that you think you'll magically arrive at where life just snaps into place. Life improves as you improve your capacity to generate more positive states for yourself now, and also just to be willing to open up to the aspects of life that contain some negativity and not have a knee-jerk reaction to try to get away from them as quickly as possible. Right? In my case, when I was younger, and so many of us just don't have the awareness that we're doing that, in my hurry to get away from what I was going through in my family life, I was going to the food and I was creating problems on top of problems, not consciously. But that's what ends up happening, is when we're not willing to process what we feel, is we spread it out across the different areas in our lives, and it becomes even more difficult then to process through, because you have these layers of negative emotion. The sadness triggers the stress and the anxiety, and you become sandwiched in. But if you just let yourself feel some stress in your life, then you can process that through. You can let that be okay, that today you're feeling some stress, or in this moment. Doesn't mean that that state is fixed or final. No, because a state isn't something that you arrive at. It's something that you cultivate in your life. And sometimes we choose to feel some negative emotion, and there's a reason for that. All emotion is just a signal to pay attention. What in your life is asking for your attention right now. Check in with what emotion you're most aware of right now. Why might you be feeling that right now? How does it want you to be with it? Stop for a moment trying to control whatever's going on in your life or whatever has happened right now. Whatever is alive for you, how does it want you to be with it?
Yeah, and I love that you're bringing that attention to that, because I think that what we've been saying up to this point, it might sound kind of like just do what feels good, right? But then that's not the message either, because sitting on my couch and binging on Oreos feels great. But is that what my body wants me to do? Probably not. So I think the disclaimer here is that you need to be honest with yourself. And like you said, so when those negative, quote unquote, right, negative, because we label it negative, but it's not, right? It's like you said, it's just something that needs attention. So if we're honest with ourselves, then then I guess what we need will feel good, right? Because we have that honesty, instead of like, well, eating Oreos on the couch feels good because I'm just trying to avoid this discomfort. That's another layer that's not going to serve you. So it's almost hard to explain, right? Because it just takes time with yourself, right? Like asking those questions. And that's like what me and Stephanie have been trying to do with Hope Warrior, is just to encourage people to like think about these things, to like open yourself up to like what you need for healing. And whatever worked for Sarah might not resonate with you or the next guest, like, but just listening and thinking about it and opening yourself up and thinking like, how does that feel in my body? When I think about that, how does that make me feel? Maybe trying some things out and giving yourself grace if they don't work. So it's a process that takes time, I think. But yeah, it's all good stuff.
It all sounds kind of funny to think of feeling your feelings as a skill, but that's what it really comes down to. We all openly accept that our bodies benefit from regular training and conditioning and that we can develop ourselves that way. But when it comes to our mental health, most people are confused as to how to work on their mental health. They imagine it involving sitting in a therapist chair. And yes, sometimes it does. And also, if you are on the whole, functioning super well in your life but you feel some stress or whatever it is, or you just feel like there could be more, we all benefit from working on our minds, because every single decision that you've ever made in your life and that you ever will make will be processed through your mind. So if your mind is crowded out by all these different emotions going on in there that are impeding your ability to think clearly, to be solution oriented and not problem fixated, that's going to get in the way. And so and in the way of you living your life well, which doesn't mean being positive all the time. It just means feeling less negative about the negative, because the negative is often there as part of growth. It's like the last reps in the gym, we expect those to feel kind of sore on the body. There's a reason for that, because that's where the muscle's breaking down and able to then grow. Well, same in our mental health. When we're going after the different things that we want to create more of in our lives, there's going to be some discomfort that goes along with that. But when you're not so stopped by it, when you don't make the excuse that you don't have time to feel whatever you're feeling, you won't be so stopped by it. So many of us are in a hurry, and the reason it's taking so long is just because we're unwilling to feel sensation and vibration in the body, which is all emotion is. When you slow down and you open to it, you realize that's all it really is. So if you become familiar with it, you won't have so much of a knee-jerk reaction to make things like your day-to-day or your life stressful. Those don't have to be facts of life. Those get to be conscious decisions. Do I want to feel stressed about this deadline? Do I want to feel stressed about my job? Maybe you do, but have you checked in with yourself to ask yourself? Because it's not something like your job's job to not make you feel stressed in your life. That's up to you. And I'm not saying there's circumstances that aren't challenging for us to, have that emotional check-in around, but it is powerful to realize Nothing outside of you needs to change for you to start experiencing the feeling of more of the life that you want to be living. And the more that you stabilize in that feeling, the more you'll go on to create the external that will match that internal, not the other way around.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, like, because that was a huge shift for me, is this idea of like life is happening to you or is life happening for you? And when you're a child, like, I'm sorry, but life happens to you. It just does, because you're a child. And if you were responsible for your life, like what would happen, right? Like, we could only like imagine. So like, you know, hopefully you have, and it doesn't even matter if you have amazing people around you, like nobody knows what you need 100%. So like people are going to fall short, like we're human, right? So then we have to go through this transformation process of what did align with me and what didn't, and then we have to do the work to figure that out. And the way to figure that out is spend time with yourself and feel the feels, right? So I love that.
Yeah, you be that amazing person.
Yes,
you're looking
right.
for it all around you. Hang on, like it's right there. That's why people say like, oh, I lost myself. Like, look in the mirror, you're right there. But can you feel a connection to yourself? Can you be that amazing person? And what's in between you and being able to be that to yourself? Because that's your work. When I'm talking about the task and the way of your task, the relationship you have with yourself is going to determine the relationship you have with most everything in your life. The relationship you have to money, the relationship to the life you're currently living, to, you know, your spouse, your kids, whatever it is. Your relationship to yourself is going to be reflected in that.
Yes. So how is this showing up in your life today? Like, what has been, I guess, like the biggest differences you can see in like your mindset shift and how life is different from before ending up in the hospital?
I think the beautiful thing that I've been able to cultivate through this work, through focusing on my mental health first and my physical health and building that as my solid foundation from which to go on to create the rest of my life on, has been that I am able to be more responsive to life. Hey, life is going to throw you curveballs out of left field like a global pandemic. It's not over. You can never fully have a certain future, but your future is your property. You get to build on that. And because I live my life from that space, you know, I'm willing to take the exquisite risk of building the life that I actually want to be living and to experience it today, not wait for it. How would the person that I imagine myself becoming make the decisions that's in front of me today? I live my life from that place, and I feel on the whole so well. I'm rooted in a feeling of wellness because I know that I would never leave myself in an emotional state like depression and just contract away and disconnect from myself and leave myself there. No, what am I needing? What can I bring to myself in those moments? And because of that, I'm so much more resilient. I'm less reactive to my life. Instead of putting out fire after fire, dealing with problem on top of problem, I'm focused on creating my life instead of reacting to it. And so that is where the place that I've arrived at in my life. And it really comes from making health the way that I get ahead in life.
And no doubt the work that you've done on yourself and everything that you've learned has inspired you then to help others. And so we talked a little bit about this at the beginning when I was introducing you. There's some things that you're doing to then now take your experiences and the knowledge and things that you've learned and now help others. So how is that? Talk a little bit about that, but also how is that then helping you as well? Because I think it does help us when we're able to then share our experiences with others.
For sure. And I think that ties into my understanding of what I see as a hope warrior. A hope warrior is someone who takes what they've been through, what has happened to them, and who decides what they'll do with what has happened to them, who becomes an example of what is possible. It's someone who takes responsibility for their own healing and who takes responsibility for their life, a radical responsibility. Living your life is up to you. And so a lot of that is what I now bring out with my clients. I continue to learn from the healing that other people around me do. But by having spent a portion of my life where I didn't try to fix or change anyone around me, it was phenomenal because it really rippled out and mirrored back to me without me having to have conversations or sit down with certain people. The relationships in my life that had been broken down earlier in my life really healed as a result of me healing my relationship with myself. Just simply because all of a sudden, when I was with other people, it wasn't about needing to be seen or validated or anything from them because I could give that to myself. I was able to allow them to feel more felt, seen, heard, understood, and all of that on a very unconscious way of just my way of being holding space for that. And so, in the work that I do with my clients today, helping them heal their health from the inside out, it's really, you know, shining the spotlight on something that we've been overlooking, which is the emotional weight that we put on. I think there's this distinction between emotional health and emotional obesity, I would call it. And we're seeing a crisis of emotional health, especially right now, where the circumstances that people are rumbling through are super challenging with a pandemic and the implications that's had on them and their loved ones and everything like that. It's a lot. And to name that it's a lot is important. And the work that we can do there is just to say, where am I in the midst of all this? Because if I can take care of myself and the way that I'm feeling, I'll be better able to take care of the circumstances that are asking for my attention right now. And so I do that with people who are struggling with different disorders with their health, but also in the weight loss space, helping people lose that emotional weight. And the byproduct of that is the weight loss. So we focus on weight loss really by first releasing the weight that's making it such a struggle to lose the weight in the first place.
Well, I have never heard the term emotional obesity, but it makes perfect sense now that you say it. I mean, never thought about that. But yeah, I mean, if we're just holding on and layering on and keeping all these emotions and not processing them and, you know, being able to work through them. Yeah, I like that term.
Yeah, because how do we measure emotional health? How do we measure emotional fitness? Those are the things that I, through my podcast, the Mind Body Academy podcast, and through the work that I do with my clients, am bringing light to. So people are like, I know exactly what that means in my life. And so that would be something that I would leave your listeners with. What does it mean for you to be emotionally healthy? What does it mean for you to be healthy, period? Not just your body and mind and body. What does that mean to you? Are you living that now? You get to define that for yourself, but open your mind to the possibility of what that can mean. And there's a whole emerging field around this that I feel so privileged to be a part of because around 7 years ago, when I got started in the coaching industry, life coaching and health coaching, it wasn't something that people were familiar with. But then with the boom in online education, now that has really created this eruption of an entire field around this where people are learning the tools and the skill sets. Thank goodness it's starting to be integrated into institutions and academic settings and things like that. We're realizing that the responsibility of mental and emotional health is something that we have to make accessible to people and to be willing to seek professional help on this and not just assume you can do it all on your own.
That's so exciting to me. Like, I know a lot of people like to focus on, or not like to, but I guess it's easier to focus on like the negative that's happening in the world. But like when I think about how far we've come in understanding how our minds work and what motivates us and how we make our decisions, that excites me because I'm just thinking like like just my children, right? What I'm telling them, like I'm just thinking they're going to be so much more equipped to handle life if they just understand how their mind works, right? And like, and then the generation after that, like how much are they going to understand? So that's just that's exciting to me. But I could talk about this literally for hours. And I know we're going kind of long. So if somebody wants to hear more about like, you know, what you're, all this stuff that you're saying, because there's so much more, right? This is just like a sliver of it. So, you know, like you already mentioned your podcast. So if you want to share that again, or how can people connect with you or follow you?
Yeah, so there's a few things. First thing I want to invite you to do is come hang out in this new community I created, the Genius Body Community. This is where you will get access to all the latest and greatest. I'll be doing live trainings in there and all sorts of good things. And plus, it's a place, right? If you feel like you're the only one working on this, or you want that support of a community around you, that's the perfect place to go find that. And then I have the Mind Body Academy podcast, which I release episodes weekly. You can kind of go back through some of the episodes in there because there's amazing things that you can start applying to your life right now and kind of use it as a menu for what you might be dealing with and that you might need some support on. And then lastly, you can head on over to thegeniusbody.com with the THE. And I would love to get to know where you're at and help you move the needle in the direction you want to be going. So I love to connect with people, people to people. And I'm happy to hop on a call with you to check in with where you're at and how you would like to be supported.
Thank you for sharing those resources. I mean, I think it's always so helpful to, so I mean, this was a fantastic discussion today. I mean, I really, really, really enjoyed this. So many good things and so many, it tied a lot of what Lydia and I have talked to some of our other guests about as well. It's kind of just tied a lot of that together. But I also love that you have some of these additional resources that people can check out to go deeper into this, and knowing that, first of all, well, you've experienced some of this yourself. So you're just not telling somebody, here's some things, to consider, et cetera. But like, I've done it and I've seen it work for me. Here are things to consider. I think so that gives a lot of credibility. So thank you for sharing those resources. And we'll definitely link those in the show notes so people can just click and go right there and easily access that. But, all right. Thanks, everyone. And we will catch you on our next episode. To all you Hope Warriors out there, thank you for joining us today to hear another incredible story.
We hope that you are encouraged and are taking away something positive for your own life. If you want to hear more stories like the one today, be sure to subscribe to this podcast.
And don't forget to tell your friends about it, because we can all use some extra hope in our lives.